A very good morning to all our participants. We thank you for joining us on this budget special breakfast hangout. We start our road-blocked budget coverage today, where tax experts Anish Thacker and Ameya Kunte shall share their premonitions and predictions in a discussion moderated by Taxsutra's group editor Arun Giri. Our first speaker, Anish, is a partner at SRBC and Associates LLP and has more than 30 years of experience in income tax advisory, compliance, and litigation assignments. He is a fellow member of the ICAI and a law graduate from Mumbai University. He was also the president of the Chamber of Tax Consultants, a body of tax professionals established in 1926 for the year 2020-21. He frequently speaks at seminars and conferences for professional fora and industry fora. Our second speaker, Amay, has over 18 years of professional experience and specializes in direct tax, international tax, and business and transaction advisory. During 2003 to 2010, Amay worked with leading international consulting firms, whereby he advised Indian and international MNCs on domestic and international tax issues. Setting on an entrepreneurial journey in 2010, Amay co-founded Taxsutra and worked as an executive editor until January 2019. Since 2019, he has started his independent consulting in tax, restructuring, and business advisory. He has set up a boutique consulting firm by the name of Globe View Advisors LLP. With this, I now hand it over to Taxsutra's group editor, Arun Giri, to commence the session.
Yeah, this budget mornings have become almost like a redux, a cliche every year. We now hear for almost, not almost, this is our 11th or 12th budget since we started Taxsutra, and every budget hangout, we think about 2 hours to go for the speech. What will the FM announce? You have all the WhatsApp messages buzzing. Ye aa raha hai, ye check karo. This is what my sources are telling. I got a late night message from someone in Mumbai, one of the top stockbrokers. Some relief is going to come on withholding tax. So can you check? Now, withholding tax has so many sections and so many subsections. I was just wondering what exactly are they referring to? There's a lot of buzz about what will happen to capital gains tax. On the one hand, you have stock markets at 60,000, which have doubled since the pandemic lows of 28, 26,000 or whatever they were. And you had spate of unicorns. So what will happen to the capital gains space, considering that the transaction space, the deals have been just on fire over the last 8 to 10 months. That is a space to watch out for capital gains. And last but not the least, the elections. You have 5 elections. You have 2 more years to go before the next general elections. And next year will be the last full budget before the general elections of 2024. This may just set the stage for them. So will it be an election budget or a budget which will try to once again give an impetus to the economy? Last year, it was all about how we will recover from the pandemic, whether we need green shoots, whether we need to give that booster shot to the economy. This year, it's more about the tax collections. Look at the Economic Times here. This is what it says. Ready for strong, agile FY23 is what Swaminathan Ankleshwara here says, one of the most renowned economists. He says enough fiscal space implies there will be revenue both for raising capex and welfare measures. Will this be a welfare-oriented budget? Continue with stimulus to aid economy. You had the economy, recovery economic survey report yesterday, and the new chief economic advisor V. Anantha Nageswaran says once the pandemic cloud itself is lifted and many of the contact services come back into the pre-pandemic level, we hope that along with the various measures that the government has taken and private sector capex also keep kicking in, we will go into a virtuous cycle of income generation and employment generation. On that note, we start this hangout with our experts, Anish and Amay. Dear friends, is Anish there?
No, he's not yet joined. He's joining.
Anish is not yet joined, but Amay is very much here. Amay, you had your breakfast?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I'm just having it.
Pleasure
nice
to be
in Mumbai. So Anish, Amay, till Anish joins in, we'll hear from you first. Quick take, 3 or 4 themes which you think that the finance minister will focus on, both tax and non-tax.
Sure, Arun. So thank you. Pleasure to be here. I think on a very macro basis, economy is recovering reasonably well, and tax collections, both direct tax and GST, are back on track. So that gives the finance minister to play with a lot of things around fiscal space, I guess. And as you rightly mentioned, this year, big state election, and the next budget will be the budget before the general elections, possibly. So we will have 2 election budgets. If any difficult decision finance minister has to take on the policy on the tax side, this is the budget to watch out for sure. Balancing, of course, the election considerations. The other thing, I think Anish has joined. Welcome, Anish. One more key aspect is that a lot of middle class, I mean, I'm talking about the theme side and we'll then move on to corporates, but last 2 years have been really tough because of the COVID pandemic, and keeping in mind the populist approach. I think some more soothing of nerves for the middle class is something which I think the government might consider as well. One more aspect on a is, as you rightly mentioned, around the wealth creation. I think the wealth creation in the country is unprecedented, be it unicorns, be it IPOs, and the technology sector doing really well. In fact, the number of patents, if you see in India, is all-time high, as Economic Survey points out. So I think there is generally a tremendous wealth creation unleashed post-pandemic, be it startups and so on. So how finance minister sort of tackles it, and I just hope that the final nail in the coffin should not be in terms of estate taxes, which is the demand world over. I'll take a pause here, Arun, and we'll speak more on other themes as well later.
Anish, we've done this for 10 years in a row almost, Anish. So, my heart was in my mouth when I did not see you at 9 a.m.
I am sorry, I just got a little delayed. And also, sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so pardon me.
Mumbai has been unusually cold this winter. So, Anish and I stay only 10 minutes apart. Anish, your top 3 themes, both tax and non-tax, for this budget. There is an expectation that this could be an election-oriented budget. Ameya says there could be some middle-class reliefs. We could also be looking at a lot of action on the tax front, Anish, as there has been over the last few years. But the big themes, Anish, that you are expecting?
I think my top 3 themes, if you ask me, one is a continued boost for Make in India. And I think that is going to be continued in my view. The reason is that, as Ameya rightly said, we've had many unicorns in this country. On the technology side, we've been doing really well. The patents, as Ameya pointed out, very rightly, we have the highest number of patent registrations. So Make in India is something that I believe will continue, and we should see some kind of more incentives for manufacturing, maybe on the PLI side, maybe by way of other incentives, etc. I don't think there's going to be a reduction in corporate tax rate beyond the 15%. I cannot see that going down any further, particularly because of the Pillar 2 initiative that the OECD has come up with. But certainly some kind of incentives for manufacturing are in order. The second thing Ameya rightly pointed out is that there is a lot of wealth creation that has happened. But as a result, what has happened is that the inequality between the wealthy and the not so wealthy has gone up, and the gap is increasing. And I think the government should, in my view, and this is again in consonance with the theme that Ameya said, that the middle class needs a little more relief. I believe the middle class has suffered the worst in the COVID times. They have neither been so poor as to receive all the benefits, neither have they have been so rich so as to tide over the pandemic. So there is some relief expected for the middle class, be it in a realignment of the tax rate, tax slab, not tax rate, tax slab, be it in some sort of an increased deduction for health related expenditures, so your ATD deduction for Mediclaim, as well as medical expenses may go up. And also I think there is a cause for some sort of relief for the salary earners, because they have been spending money sitting at home, working from home on infrastructure, on expenses on electricity, internet, etc. So maybe a increase in standard deduction. That's the second theme I see. The third theme that I see is something where I would believe the government does need to do uh, something, is to simplify the compliance requirement. And I think the economic survey somewhere indicates that. I think it says that there are some 150 odd compliance which are still offline, and they are going to make all of these electronic bar 3 of them where PAN is not required. So I think that is a step in the right direction, but I think that the common man is overwhelmed by the amount of compliance that he has to do. And I think a simplification in compliance is something that has to be done by the government.
Last year, thanks so much, Anish. Last year we had goodwill amendment. Are we done with those big bang ones? A lot of people have been talking about crypto and this and that. But a direct question, Ameya, is anything big bang on the likes of the goodwill amendment we saw last year? You think any such big impact amendment are we expecting this time?
Yeah, so actually in the last couple of budgets, we are seeing a trend of legislature sort of relooking at the court judgments. Goodwill was a classic example, and few more in the last couple of budgets. So three sort of, so it may not be a big bang, but I think three rationalizations or revisiting the judicial precedents on three areas might happen. One is there has been a Delhi High Court judgment this year on the application of MFN clause on dividends paid under the treaty. While of course it is a treaty interpretation, a bit also is relevant in the context of domestic law, and that impacts a lot of MNCs in a pre or in a DDT era. So that's one key area to watch out for. Two more. One is a deduction for education cess, possibly an explicit clarification might come. And third is, of course, after all the adverse High Court judgments on reassessment, I think the law on reassessment might be relooked at possibly. And one small point, Arun, we also saw one landmark judgment around software taxation from the
I'm going to mention that. I thought I missed that.
No,
he couldn't have missed it.
No, but I mean, good thing is that judgment largely is on the treaty law, and not much can be done. But I just hope and wish that if government eases out the past refunds around that, because domestic law is already wide and there's nothing more that can be done. But
no prospective amendment there, right, Anish?
I hope not. I don't think so. See, the idea was this was all about the interpretation.
But a review petition has been filed.
So
a review petition has been filed on the software.
Yes, I know that. So let the Supreme Court decide. I think there should be faith in the judiciary and India's judicial system to decide the issue. And I think that hopefully there will be no amendment on that count. But yes, I think Ameya was right. The reassessments, the controversy that has kind of arisen as to whether the old law or the new law will be applicable, I think they'll probably just clarify that one. And I think also on the faceless appeals, there was a challenge done to the faceless appeals. They've modified the scheme to remove some of the anomalies. But I think there also needs to be an amendment to Section 50 to give sanction for some of those amendments. I think that will happen in this budget. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I'll quickly go through some of the budget bites that have come in from a lot of leading tax professionals, the videos that we did over the last 4 weeks. And the editorial team really, led by Vikrant and Megha, put this together. I'll quickly read out what some of the tax experts have said. Senior advocate Saurabh Soparkar calls for simplicity, certainty, and clarity in taxation. He is expecting an early resolution of unintended issues like the applicability of concessional tax rate to new manufacturing companies, the scope of ATM, and he also says that the retrospective amendment on denial of depreciation on goodwill is creating serious complications in computing dividends, and he hopes that the high tax rates for individuals will be lowered. Then, which are the ones? What is Bobby Parekh has to say? Bobby is saying that the lawmakers should avoid making frequent and multiple changes in the existing provisions of statutes, and in specific refers to capital gains tax regime, which has been modified 20 times. That is Anish's favorite section. What will Anish do for a living if they don't amend the capital gains regime? He urges the government to adopt a holistic and comprehensive approach. And yeah, like Ameya says, that tax does not operate in isolation, and business does not operate in a vacuum. Calls for easing of compliance. No doubt about it. I'll read out one or two more. Which ones? Yeah. What is Parul from Nishit Desai, Parul Jain, and yeah, she talks about gift city and whether the government can come up with a 3 or 4 year capital gains tax exemption to give a fillip to the private equity sector. She also talks about carried interest, and she's asking for an amendment for clarifying the unintended lacuna on carry forward of tax holidays pursuant to the merger. And she feels that there might not be any major changes on the digital economy taxation front. And we have someone on the transfer pricing front as well. Vijay Iyer. Vijay is a transfer pricing leader at EY, and he says that India needs a far more active and effective dispute resolution mechanism in addition to MAP, APA, and DRP, which already we have. And he wants a timeline for completion of APA. Now, if bureaucrats were to be given timelines for these tasks, then I think then it will be difficult. The moment you have timelines, instead of 1,000 APA applications, you may as well have 3,000. So those are some of the, just giving you a flavor of what people are expecting. Quick couple of thoughts. Anish, first, half a minute you want to spend on some of these, what some of these luminaries have had to say?
Yeah, I think, look, on capital gains, this is everybody's favorite, group of sections, as you rightly said, and there can be a lot of things that can be done. The only one thing that I can think of, which is simple to do, is that if you see history, securities transaction tax was actually introduced to in a way compensate for the exemption of long-term capital gains and the lowering of the rates of short-term capital gain on the transfer of listed securities. We are back with taxation of long-term capital gains. Yes, the rate of tax on short-term capital gains has remained 15% as it was, but long-term capital gains are back now at 10%, right, on listed securities under 112A. So I think there is some cause, and I think I've heard some, people say that securities transaction tax needs to be removed. I think that there is a scope for relooking at that. I think that should be done. The other thing that I believe is that capital gains have become complicated due to piecemeal amendments here and there. And I think there is a scope for relooking at the entire scheme of capital gains and making them simpler. Because, you have different sections dealing with different types of capital gains. If you've listed securities, you have one type of, one set of sections. If you have unlisted securities, you have another set of sections. You have ULIPs, you have a third set of sections. You have immobile property, you have a fourth set of sections to look at. I think that's just creating, and all of those sections, if you see in the last, 10 years or so, have always been amended with little tweaks here and there. So I think there is some merit in relooking at the entire capital gains regime and trying to simplify it, which is what I think one of the luminaries did kind of mention. But I presume that this will be done, I think, next year, where the bigger election is. I think this year, as Ameya rightly pointed out, that you're going to have 2 election budgets. This is a mini election budget, and the next year will be the mega election budget. And I think the major slew of reliefs that is going to come next year. This year, yes, there will be some COVID related relief. There will be some steps taken, I believe, to institute or kickstart those mega reforms. But I'm expecting mega reforms to happen next year, to be honest.
Sure. Ameya, on the corporate tax front, anything that we expect, because that's the area that really concerns a lot of our readers, and quite honestly, the spreadsheets will be buzzing if some tricky amendments come in.
Absolutely, Arun. I think one good thing I have seen after the introduction of 22% flat corporate tax rate without any tax holiday, effective rate then goes to up to 25%. I think you leave aside the tax planning or the interpretation issues, by and large, if you talk to a promoter, they are reasonably comfortable to pay 25% and move on and not really get into a territory of uncertainty around litigation. So it's just that mindset issue. At times you feel that, okay, for few percentage here and there, let's not do anything unnatural, but let's pay 25% and move on. So I think that's a good thing which is already happening. The 15% tax rate on manufacturing sector, I think, is really, really, really very, very important. And I think economic survey also points out that there has to be a domestic capex expansion. And I have 2 specific suggestions or considerations. One is that the tax holiday to be eligible to claim this 15% rate, manufacturing has to begin by March 23. I think that should be extended at least by a year so that the COVID year lost can be recouped, and it can really help in capital expenditure on manufacturing. Number one. Number two, there are a few exclusions, as Mr. Soparkar pointed out. Some more relaxation. I'm just giving a very wide suggestion. Software today is out of this manufacturing 15% rate, but again, economic survey points out the highest contributor in the economy and in the exports in the economy is software. So, can you include that back into the 15% rate? So those are some sort of bold sessions, but by and large, I think corporate tax is fairly stable. I mean, you could always have a debate on whether to allow CSR expenditure and here and there. I mean, of course, goodwill, non-compete expense, charges paid by the companies when they do acquisition. Those are some of the points, but at a macro level, corporate tax is fine. What is really hitting the promoters is the tax on the dividends, which is really at a high rate.
Anish, you want to add to that?
No, I think a very, very important point made by Ameya that, dividend tax today, I think, has emerged as, I think I believe that there was a demand for removal of the exemption for dividend only for the purpose of 14A coming into play and creating unintended consequences because of the way the formula of Rule 8D was working. But when you remove, when you try to solve for one thing, you've created another difficulty where, as Ameya rightly said, for the promoters, dividend now becomes taxable at the highest effective rate of 42% because of the increased amount of surcharge. And I think there is some, merit in capping the tax rates for dividend to a reasonable rate. I mean, you cap it at whatever rate. If you want, you cap it at 20%, you want, you cap it at 25%. But there is some cause of capping dividend tax rate. The simple reason for that is that dividend, remember, is a post-tax, distribution. So it is distribution of the money which has already been taxed once in the hands of the company. To economically tax it again at the highest rate in the hands of the shareholder receiving it is incongruous. If at all you want to tax it at the highest tax rate, go back to the pre-independence era regime of allowing a credit for the tax paid by the company on that dividend. At least, do something about it. I would believe that, in pre-independence era, dividend was taxable, but you used to get a rebate for the tax that the company paid. And I think, that system should be relooked at if at all you want to tax dividend, or else the simpler thing to do is cap the tax rate, is what I would believe.
Anish,
Arun,
please, please.
another small area is taxation of ESOPs. Again, with all the wealth creation and startup ecosystem increasing, ESOPs is a very, very popular tool. And of course, credit to the government for easing out some provisions around ESOPs. But just to summarize, today for a deferral of withholding tax on ESOPs, the entity needs to be approved for the purpose of startup, and there are two-stage approvals. First stage is easy, but the second stage, which is the ATIAC approval, is slightly discretionary process and not easy to get through. And only after that process you get the ESOP benefit for tax purpose, which is really difficult for many of the startups. And again, keeping in line with the theme of wealth creation and giving a boost to the startup system and GDP growth, I think some rationalization around ESOP is definitely welcome, because startups, I mean, and Arun, cash is very critical aspect, and companies want to share wealth with the employees as well in the value creation. So I think some more liberalization will really help the startup ecosystem.
Oh, we've now crossed almost 50. I think we've crossed 50 unicorns. So the ESOPs wealth creation has been the buzzword. Just one Freshworks IPO in the US, I think, saw 500 plus dollar millionaires. Employees who became dollar millionaires. So let's.
On a very lighter note, Arun, at times in the very early stage of the startup, the merchant banker fees are more than the tax that the company pays on ESOPs. So,
yeah, very much.
That is actually true. I think what Ameya says is absolutely right. I think, there are two sets of provisions where ESOP gets it. One is obviously the point of taxation itself. The other is when you allot the ESOPs, you have to allot them at a particular fair market value. And that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Again, I would think that as far as ESOPs is concerned, life should be made very simple. Let the company allot it at whatever price, free of cost, whatever it wants to the employee, and tax the employee only and only when he sells it. There's no point in taxing him on what is called dry income, right? He doesn't have the cash to pay. Whenever he has the cash to pay out of the sale proceeds, let him pay the tax. I think that's a very fair ask.
Yeah, income tax is anything but fair. Next is personal tax, Anish. On the personal tax front, completely unrelated. But you had then this all started with the Morgan Stanley report, and I was there when it was presented. Ruchir Sharma spoke about it, that over $23,000 millionaires had fled the country, renounced Indian citizenships between 2015 and 20, and that's only increased. So now I saw the figure as 1 lakh or something in the last 3 years overall, in the last 7-8 years. But that trend is just accelerating. And that being the case, Anish, are we becoming, in some ways, an extremely unattractive destination for tax destination for wealthy people? And how are you going to reverse this trend, lest everyone, including you, think of migrating to a Singapore or a Panama or UK, wherever?
No, I think it's not so much about the rate of tax. I think it is also so much about the complications you have in terms of administering whatever is there. So, today a tax return form, for example, is called Saral, but is nothing but Saral to fill, right? That challenge always remains. The other thing is that the varying interpretations that are taken for things like, for example, eligibility of foreign tax credit, right? If somebody has income overseas and he files a joint return of him and his wife in the US, the Indian tax office is taking a view that half the foreign tax credit belongs to you, half of it belongs to the wife, irrespective of how much income of which person goes into that joint tax return. So, those are things which are the challenges. I think the implementation of the law, the complications around everything, you look at any deduction or exemption under section 10 or section or chapter 6A, there are 10 conditions attached to the claim of that exemption or deduction. And I think that is the problem. You need to solve for that. You need to create an environment where a tax office, a tax officer actually is able to look at a return prima facie and decide whether somebody is eligible or not, and in all fairness, give that exemption. He doesn't have to look at 10 different conditions to see whether that person is eligible for that exemption or not. And of course, the third point, is the whole treatment that is meted out to people who pay highest taxes. Us giving off a silver or a gold or a platinum certificate serves nothing, right? You have to give them a differentiated taxpayer experience when they are dealing with the tax office. If that person is going to be, who's paid his tax honestly throughout his life, he's going to be made to wait, for his queries to be addressed. He's going to be made to run from pillar to post to get a simple rectification done. Then I think, people will rightly look at probably migrating to, a different country. Though I would believe that tax is probably not the sole reason for migration. But yes, I think that the taxpayer experience needs to improve.
I'm sure a lot of clients must be approaching you, and especially over the last 12 to 18 months, I'm sure, on how do you move structures overseas and so on and so forth. Ameya, what's the concern that you hear from them and you think the finance minister can address, apart from what Anish said? Ameya is on mute.
Arun, tax is definitely one area, but the whole host of regulatory framework, particularly around the new age technology companies, is one of the key areas. Another reason why you want to have a structure outside, be it Singapore or even, for that matter, even US. I mean, though it's a high tax country. So just to give an example and set the context, most of the early stage funding investors today specifically insist the promoters that we don't want to put the money into the Indian entity, create some structure in US, and we will be happy to put the money over there, because we don't want that headache of dealing with several regulatory compliances, which has nothing to do with tax. So this is one very, very common, and that unfortunately leads to the Indian promoters, where bulk of the business or the development is in India, are forced to create some unwieldy or inefficient structures that again has a problem of round tripping from an exchange control standpoint and so on. So I think this whole regulatory framework, particularly around the new age businesses, is another area. RBI, for example,
I think Ameya, the best classic example is this whole gaming, whether it's a game of chance and skill, when you have unicorns in that space already. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sure, absolutely. I mean, so that
you're talking about RBI.
Yeah, no. So I was just saying that, for example, on the round tripping, last year RBI floated a consultation paper actually allowing round tripping, provided there is no tax avoidance. But we still haven't seen a final policy announcement on that point. But beyond tax, I think some of these changes would really help. Again, making sure that the capital does not move out. Arun, you mentioned about people moving out. I think even this year there was some article about a week ago about number of people surrendering the Indian citizenship. I think that number continues to grow and very high as well. And then, of course, the quality of life and the social security, those are always the factors which come into picture thereafter. So,
yeah, it made headlines, and one of the biggest industrialists in Asia or in this world, who happens to reside here in India, was rumored to have bought a mansion in UK, had to issue a denial. That's not the case, but that's where probably we all are headed. Last 2 minutes, Anish and Ameya, 20 seconds each first on the litigation landscape, and are we going to again see a lot of amendments just for housekeeping? Ameya first.
So Arun, yeah, so I think first, I mean, definitely credit due to the tax administration on using the technology. I think one small point this year, the revelation that CAs have had about their clients' profile and the number of bank accounts which they even were not aware. It's fantastic. So credit to them. Of course, there were technical glitches, but that's fine. I think it will get improved. The number of assessments and the adverse assessments that have come, and therefore subsequent CIT appeals, is, I think, perhaps the lowest, which is a fact during this particular year. So again, the faceless regime is working, in my view. I think barring the reassessment related tweaking, there should not be major change. And of course, clarity around the faceless appeals before tribunals is something which is again a key area to watch out for.
Yeah, Anish, 20 seconds on litigation, your favorite area.
Yeah, I think that Ameya was right to say that, the faceless tribunal is something that is, to be eagerly watched out for. What shape and form does it take? I am a little old school. I believe that, a face-to-face hearing is very, very important. And the tribunal has been excellent in terms of upholding, its own integrity and, the integrity of the judicial system. So my personal take is that tribunal should not become faceless. I'm very happy at the glitches in the faceless appeal scheme being removed. Hopefully, if a video conference hearing is given and a patient hearing is given to all taxpayers when they demand it, I think that is a taxpayer's right. And therefore, I think I welcome the faceless appeals, CIT appeals. And only thing is, I wish that these kickstart very quickly such that the backlog gets removed. On the faceless assessment, I believe Ameya is right that this year we've had the lowest amount of adjustments, at least in terms of the number of cases which have been adjusted in the last decade or so that I recollect. And if that is a thing to be seen over the years, then I'll be the most happy. I feel that this is just a factor of the the newness of the whole process, and I think which is why people are just getting used to it. I'm a little skeptical about this trend continuing, but I hope and pray that it does.
I will stop you there, Anish, because I need to have a last word from both of you. Not more than 10-15 seconds each. I'll put you all on the block. Any reduction in personal taxes? Yes or no? Quick. Yes or no?
That's no.
It. No. Any reduction in corporate tax rates?
No.
No, not required.
Any reduction in capital gains tax or an increase?
No.
Reduction or increase?
No.
None. Here I am differ. Something on capital gains tax should be coming with the sort of action we've seen in the deal space. Something should happen there. Number 4, anything major on the administrative side, amendments?
I think whatever has been done has been done. I can't see much.
So nothing on the like we did abolished AAR settlement commission. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होने वाला इसे. Okay,
no,
fine.
I don't think so.
In fact, AAR, if not anything, should be strengthened, Arun. It's
sure. That's done. Yeah, and number 5, will the reassessment ruling of the Supreme Court, of the Delhi High Court and the other courts, will they be reversed in this budget?
Most likely, yes.
Yes.
That note, we say a goodbye. We've not had too many questions, but people have been commenting. I have received thanks, Anish Amay, for a good start up to the Union Budget 2022. This is from Jignesh Desai. Thanks, Jignesh, for joining in. Many people, others have joined in, and we'll also share the YouTube link for those who missed the breakfast session. A pleasure to always chat with my good friends, Anish and Amay. The budget speech is 75 minutes away. Today on Taxsutra, we have roadblock coverage by our editorial team, the finest that is in this industry. They will bring you the most incisive, real-time flashes, as well as expert views the moment the finance minister starts her speech. Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman will take the floor at 11 a.m. The speech should start around 11 to 11:03. All eyes once again, on the finance minister. We at Taxsutra will be covering this, minute to minute. Anish?
I only hope we have less than 100 clauses in the finance bill this time. I've never seen that happen.
If Anish had his way, all of us would have to be looking for another business. We are running a tax portal, so we will be wishing for 150. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
On that happiness. Thank you. Pleasure being with Taxsutra.
Arun, so perhaps that's an early indication.
Chalo, early indication. Chalo, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great budget day.
Bye. Thank you.